Black like me. Black like me. Black like me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Hey, good people. I want to welcome you back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. Hey, I'm so excited to be inside season 10. Where has the time gone? I can't believe that season 10 is here. We have already dropped close to 200 episodes. Let me just give you an overview of what we've been up to the past 9 seasons. As of today, we have just shy of 450,000 downloads, and unique downloads. In our first 9 seasons, we have listeners in 137 countries all over the world, in all 50 states. And I bet you're wondering what those top states are. Some of them are important for a lot of reasons. Wisconsin, California, then Illinois, Minnesota, then Texas, rounding off the top 5. Hey, but listen, I want to put a call out. I want to call out Washington State, Ohio, and Georgia. Come on, I want to grow the listeners there. I want you to knock somebody out of there. Not Wisconsin, but come on, Ohio and Georgia and Washington. I want you to knock some people out of the top 5 so that I can mention your name there. Listen, I'm talking to some exciting people this season, authors and Minnesota's Attorney General Keith Ellison, Professor and author Kelly Carter Jackson, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Leonard Pitts, Ben Wickler from the state of Wisconsin Democratic Party, talking about the importance of this election and the impact of Black women on all sides of it and from all directions. I'm really, really excited about that. Well, today I have a special guest, and I've been talking her up as well. It's the Chancellor of UW-Madison, Chancellor Chancellor Mnookin. And she's even given me permission to call her Jennifer. And so I'm going to do that on this episode just so she can feel like people have listened to her. Jennifer Mnookin is the 30th leader of the University of Wisconsin-Madison's 175th history and one of the nation's top legal scholars. Chancellor Mnookin, or Jennifer, is dedicated to pushing boundaries to bring the university to new levels of excellence in research and education and to energize the expansion of the Wisconsin idea, UW-Madison's commitment to innovating and public good. Her recent large launch has been the cross-campus initiative called RISE, Research, Innovation, and Scholarly Excellence, and a number of other things. Prior to coming to the Dairy State, she was in Southern California, where she worked and served as a professor in the law school for about 17 years, but she was also the dean of the law school prior to coming here. She's just got an impressive background. She studied at Harvard, at Yale, at MIT, and we get a chance to benefit from that experience. And she's here talking with me today just about her interest, her commitment to things she's doing on campus. And I envision that this is one of a 2-part series, because we're going to allude to some major work that she and I have become very familiar with, and I would love to talk more specifically once that report is released. And so this will be just the first part of that. Jennifer, welcome to Black Like Me podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Sure.
And I'm so pleased that you're going to call me Jennifer, but I might still have to call you Dr. G on the podcast. What do you think? Or if I'm Jennifer, are you Alex? You decide.
Am. Yes, okay. I am. Yes, right. I am.
Okay, Dr. Alex?
Yes, right. No. And listen, and we snapped our normal selfies whenever I see Jennifer, whether it's at concerts on the square or on campus. I try to catch a selfie, because I've said this on the show. I come from a family of Badgers. My mom graduated from Wisconsin with 2 degrees. My wife and I met there. My daughter graduated with 2 degrees. My sister, and a host of cousins. So, Jennifer, it's really an honor to have you here in my space to talk with you just about life and your work and what you're up to.
I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And I know that you have a lot of degrees in your family, a lot of UW-Madison degrees. Really proud of that. also proud of the most recent degree
Yes,
in your
ma'am.
family. You were the recipient of an honorary doctorate from UW-Madison at this past commencement. And
yes.
it was just so beautiful to be able to have you receive that well-deserved honor and to celebrate you.
Thank you so much for that, Jennifer. I was in your neck of the woods, a little further south of LA. I was in Orange County. A friend had a book launch, but they were telling me, they said, we've been watching your LinkedIn page and your Facebook page. You got an honorary degree from Wisconsin. And so I just want you to know my friends from coast to coast are celebrating with me. So
As
thank
they
you for
should
mentioning
be.
that. Yes,
That's awesome.
yes. I still pinch myself. That was so wonderful. You know, Jennifer, I lied to you. Not in a bad way, but I thought, okay, I don't want to do any icebreakers. But then I thought, wait a minute, I got to ask a couple because I get a chance to know, and they're not bad. So she's looking like, oh, Chris, you spent 7, you're a Californian. Listen, you know how to roll with the punches. But I just want to ask you a couple because what's so fun about this podcast is that people get a chance just to relax. And once we laugh, then people get a chance to see just the human side of folks outside of the things that they're doing. So I'm curious, have you had grits and or cream of wheat? And if so, do you have a preference?
I gotta say grits, no question.
I love it. I knew I liked you for some reason. Tell me some more about that.
Yeah, I like grits. I've had grits a number of times, although I've never made them myself. So I do like to cook, but I've got to say that ever since I became dean of the law school, I kind of haven't done much cooking. My husband's now the cook in our relationship. So I like eating grits, but I've never made them.
Gotcha.
Maybe I'll have to change that before you and I sit down.
You know what?
again.
We might have to hook you up, Jennifer.
Right.
So I love that. So when you have had it, have they been more savory, like with seafood or something in it, or have they been? I sort of eat them sweet. I eat them really sweet, like with breakfast, like with eggs. I'm curious.
Breakfast, lunch, or dinner, Alex.
Really?
I'm good for any of the above. Although I gotta say, I think my preference is savory.
Savory. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I got you. Now this is another one I just thought might be fun. Now you're a lawyer, so you might have to skirt around this, but I'm sure it's beyond the statute of limitations. When you were a kid, did you ever get syllable spankings? And like in the black community, syllable spankings are like when, didn't I tell you not to run in the street? Didn't I tell you, not to throw rocks at the windows? I'm curious. Did you get syllable spankings?
So, a little bit. I think the thing I got when my parents were.
Wait, I
most
saw your dad at your
angry-
investiture, so I want you to be careful so you don't get him mad at you.
Well, it was my mom actually. When she was really mad, she'd use my middle name. So it was Jennifer Lee Mnookin.
You knew you were in trouble then.
I knew I was in trouble then. That didn't happen too often, but if she used my middle name, I knew that wasn't good. That wasn't good.
I love that. So you were disciplined, so you weren't always a perfect
I was
little kid.
not always a perfect kid. No.
Hey, one more question. This is an icebreaker one. So no, you did a great job with those. What are some of the real major Californian things that just it hasn't translated to Madison, or it just doesn't work here in Wisconsin? I'm just curious, what's like some of those Californian things to eat or to do that you really miss being here?
So I love Madison. I am
Sure.
so glad to be here, and it's been an amazing 2 years. I just had my 2-year anniversary just a
Congratulations.
few days ago. But I will say that being able on a sunny January day to go take a walk in the LA canyons with a T-shirt on isn't something one can do here in Madison. And I actually, it's been fun to have seasons again.
Sure,
So
sure.
but there's a few days over the winter when I would not mind if I could get in a quick transporter and go take a nice outdoor hike in a T-shirt and then come back to snow and ice.
Got you.
That would be one. Food, I've been so impressed. I mean, Madison's got a lot of amazing food.
Yes.
And so I'll be honest with you. I thought I was going to miss the range of culinary options in LA. But for the most part, I've loved exploring all of the different
I've got to say, Madison's
here in
grown a
Madison.
lot in that area. I think it's also because people come here from all over the world to study at the university, and many stay and start businesses. But it's so much. It's way more broad than it was when I was a kid growing up. So you're catching us at a really good point in time, and I hope that continues to grow
Likewise.
in Madison.
Likewise.
Okay, listen. Well, let me just get to a couple things that love to discuss with you. And again, it's meant to be a conversational interaction so that it feels more like two acquaintances and colleagues are talking and not like you have to,
I've enjoyed every
feel-
conversation we've ever had, Alex.
Yes,
and
so
I
that's
expect
good.
to
That's
continue
that's
that
right. We're going to
today,
continue
so.
that. Well, today I want to talk about changing things for students of color at UW-Madison, and I know that's a passion of yours. We've talked about that a whole lot. So in preparing for this, I tried to think, what are questions or approach to questions that would help listeners to not only see you as a legal scholar and as a chancellor, but to also get a chance to see the person, the leader, the woman behind these ideas and some of these thoughts. And so and people are always wondering, because the university hires good chancellors, and they're often wondering, okay, who's going to take one for the team? Like, who's going to really stand? I think to quote my colleague, Dr. Angela Byers-Winston, who's going to stand 10 toes down and just really commit to these kinds of things. And I know that you've been showing that in the ambitiousness of your plans and the ad hoc committee that you commissioned along with your Chief Diversity Officer, LeVar Charleston, that you've asked Dr. Angela Byers-Winston and myself to chair. So we've gotten a chance to see some of that heart. So let me just start with this. From your investiture forward, and I was really glad to be there. That was actually my first investiture. It was really a wonderful event. You had a chance to talk about your bold plans for the university while in this very crucial and important position. And so maybe you could just talk a little bit about both your personal conviction and just some of the things that you're willing to put on the line to really help life and a sense of belonging be better for students of color at UW-Madison specifically, and this is included in it, Black students.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question and the chance to have this conversation.
Sure.
Belonging is a word you used, and I think it's a word that really has to be central for how we think about this. How do we achieve more success at helping all of our students, How do we achieve greater success at helping all of our students feel a sense of belonging? And there's no question that right now, a set of our students that tilt more toward underrepresented students of color, including some of our Black students,
Right.
don't feel as much of a sense of belonging in our spaces as some of our majority white students do. And so we have to name that. We have to not pretend that that's not true.
Right.
And we have to ask, what are the things that we can do that are in our power over time? It's not going to be all at once. It's not going to be overnight, but that can make that still better. I do think, there's that when we look at the history of these issues for UW-Madison, and you're now kind of an expert in this because you were kind enough and generous enough to co-chair this ad hoc process to really
Yes.
look at Black flourishing on campus, where we've been and where we're going. And you see two things at the same time. You see not nearly enough change. You see a lot of efforts, but that didn't necessarily achieve their goals. And you also see some real glimmers of hope and change and transformation that I hope we can grab and build on. So, our total number of Black students as a percentage has been depressingly stable over a long period of time.
Sure.
When we'd love to see that grow. We also have some new challenges in that space, like the Supreme Court decision of last summer, which I assume we'll get a chance to talk about a little bit. And that's a challenge. We have to rise to that challenge. We can't just let that be a reason we
Sure.
don't. But we also have to acknowledge we lost a tool in our toolbox, right?
Right.
But we've also seen, for example, that the percentage of our underrepresented students of color, including Black students, that graduate has gone up.
And that's good.
That's a really important thing because first and foremost, we want students to arrive to us, who arrive with us, to be able to have a successful experience, to be able to get that important credential and be able to go be change makers and leaders and excel out there in the world as graduates, hopefully proud graduates of UW-Madison. So one of the things I want to look at is how can we build on the success we've had in that space, and how can we achieve even greater success in terms of graduation rates for our students of color? What forms of support, of scaffolding, of celebration do we need to make that a bigger
Exactly.
success, right? That's one really important question. And then another important question is to try to ask, what isn't working and what in our power might we be able to do better? Culture is a complicated thing, and we're a big, messy, complicated institution of 50,000 students. And so goodness knows I don't have a magic wand that I can just wave and necessarily make changes happen. But we can try to talk about what's working and what isn't working in candid and transparent ways. And we can also set ourselves goals and try to hold ourselves accountable. And so I'd kind of like to turn this around a little, because you've just been co-chair of an ad hoc process that brought together faculty, students, staff, and community members, all from the Black community, to ask what's been going well, what's been going badly, how can we achieve change? And so I'd love to hear, if you're game to share, a little bit about your experience leading that process. The report's in its very final stages now. We're hoping
Yes,
it'll
it
be
is.
out in just a few weeks, and I think you've said we can come back and talk a little bit more when
About
when
the
it
findings,
drops.
yes. I'd love that.
But I'd love you to share a little bit about maybe what surprised you in that process, both happy surprises and disappointing ones.
Sure. I'll jump into that. Let me just ask one additional question, then I'll come back to that. What fuels your personal conviction in standing up for this kind of work? Because you walk into a position, again, that's had 29 leaders before you, and I say the last 4 or 5 have understood that this issue is of national importance. But you haven't gotten to where you are in life and in your career without being very strategic and very strong. So I would love to talk about the report. I'm going to do that in just a moment. What fuels that personal conviction to say, I've got to take this a little further than the great chancellors who went before me?
Yeah, look, I stand on their shoulders, and I do think that a number of my predecessors have genuinely and deeply cared about these issues, and so that also tells me that change is hard, right? So
Right.
I don't want to be naive about that.
Right.
I think as a public institution, we have such a responsibility to creating opportunity and to trying to innovate for the public good and bring students in who can go out there and make a difference in the world in whatever way they see fit. They're going to have a lot of different ideas about what that's going to look like. But part of that has to be broad-based opportunity across identities and beliefs. And look, we have a history of racism in this country, and we have a history of anti-Black racism in this country. And goodness knows that our institution, our university, is not exempt from that. And that has to be part of, reckoning with our past, has to be part of how we look ahead into the future. And I think we have a particular responsibility to acknowledge that reality, acknowledge the way that has had intergenerational effects on things like wealth creation, the reality of ongoing disparities that aren't right and aren't fair, and also simultaneously the truth is that the American dream that I believe in is sort of a genuinely pluralist one, where people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all skin colors, all religions, all identities, all beliefs can have the chance to reach their potential and work to build the pluralist America that I think most of us deep down want and crave and believe in. And I think we have made some progress, and I think there's a lot of work to do. And so that really motivates me. I will also share with you, Alex, that for me, Madison is a different environment than the one that I was in for 17 years. And one of the things I'm really aware of about Madison is that some students come to us from places where this is the most racially diverse place they've ever seen or been in or lived in. And other people come to us and it's maybe the least racially diverse place they've ever lived in or been in. And that's that's hard. And it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for people to try to talk to each other and learn from each other, and recognize that we have these very different experiences, but a common humanity and a common dignity. And in an ideal world, we'd be able to use those experiences to create a stronger sense of belonging for all. It's a little idealistic. I'm not
Sure.
saying we're there today or we'll
No.
get there tomorrow.
But you gotta start with an idea.
That's what we got to start with, and that's where we have to try to get.
So that seems like it seems as if just your background as a lawyer, as an academician, has taught you to be strategic. So I'm sure you bring that level of strategy. You've lived in a place to this work. You've lived in a place like Southern California, which is more diverse than Wisconsin. So you have a vision of what this looks like, and so I'm sure that plays into into what you bring in that makes this a little different, because not every chancellor has lived in an environment that diverse, and so you get to. I'm just listening to what you're saying and just helping to pull out. These are things that will help you navigate. Not saying anything against the previous chancellors, but at this point, I think leaders come into roles at a significant time because they have the skills to navigate it, and it's so great for the people who
I think,
listen to know and hear that about you.
I think for me, diversity really is an absolutely core foundational value, and I also think there's a huge amount of social science evidence showing that diverse teams tend to make stronger decisions, and
Yes.
so diversity is both a value and a strategy for excellence, right? Inclusive
Yes.
excellence is about inclusiveness and excellence and the sense that they actually help to strengthen one another, not compete with each other. And I believe that with every fiber of my being. I also believe that when we talk about diversity, we cannot ignore racial diversity. That's a hugely
Exactly.
important component. But we also can't make it only about racial diversity, right? We have to recognize we're all multitudes. We contain lots of aspects of ourselves.
We're complex.
And when we think about pluralism, not everybody has the same racial identity or the same religious identity or the same gender identity or the same beliefs, depending on what those different identities are. And that all has to be wrapped up in a vision of the world that says that we have things to learn from people who are different from us. And we also can probably learn better when there's a reasonable degree of representation of people that connect to who we are and how we see ourselves in the world. And so we need both of those.
Sure. Another strength, Jennifer, that I see that you bring to this, and I'll let this sort of bridge me into answering the question you put out about the ad hoc committee. And this perhaps is just due to your legal background, but I've watched you not shut down the conversation because people have had different opinions. I know even as we've talked about the this report that's being finalized or recommendations, there have been times I've pushed back and said, well, with all due respect, Chancellor, because in those meetings I don't call you Jennifer, with all due respect, and you keep the conversation open. And I have to tell you, I've appreciated that. That's not just blowing smoke your way, but there are times where when you're talking to a chancellor, you feel like you're talking to the principal or the superintendent or something. So to have a differing opinion and to have you be open to that, and I've seen that work both ways, but I think that's been helpful. And I'm wanting people to also understand how you operate when you're not in front of a mic or a camera.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. I think, I sometimes joke that for many of us, our strengths are also our weaknesses.
Yes,
and
ironically.
one of my strengths, which is sometimes a weakness, is I'm actually pretty good at seeing both sides of a lot of arguments.
Right.
And it's a strength because it means I really do want to hear contrary opinions.
Exactly.
I want there to be challenge. I believe that we make better decisions when we have really open and sometimes difficult conversations. Sometimes it's also a weakness because I am able to see it makes things sometimes more complicated rather than simpler.
Sure,
and sometimes
sure.
it's easier to just move ahead when it's simple and straightforward and you
Right.
can just keep that football going down the field. And instead I'm looking in multiple directions.
Yes.
So I appreciate you naming that. It's really important to me on my leadership team. It's important to me when I'm engaging with the community. It's important to me when I'm talking to students that I really do try to listen to where they're coming from. and then I'm also sometimes that questioner or lawyer or engager that kind of says, well, what about this? What about that? How
Sure.
do we think about those questions? And so I've appreciated our conversations, because there are times when you've, pushed back on. I mean, you're also a member of my community advisory committee, and
Right.
I really appreciate that you put the time in for that. And that's been a space where we can have pretty honest and sometimes hard conversations.
Definitely.
And you've been one of the people who isn't afraid to criticize the university response when you don't like it, but also one of the people who's willing to stand up and say, you've got a lot of stakeholders, you're operating in a really complex space, and I may not love what you've just done, but I get it. And I appreciate that too a lot.
And that I still love the institution
Right.
and what it's meant to my family. And I always try to bring all that together. Why support Black Like Me podcast? There are very few places where Black activists and innovators can listen to and hear someone so aptly and culturally appropriately voice their concerns and dreams and aspirations and fears and illnesses and cultural commonalities. Equally, there are so few places where concerned non-Black thinkers and feelers, readers and watchers, lovers of culture, stalwarts of racial justice and harmony can go to learn, lean in, and to be a quiet fly on the wall in Black spaces and experience deep personal transformation through listening to honest Black people's truth. Black Like Me podcast is that for so many people in this nation and around the world. Now, while your financial support beginning at as little as $2 a month will get you access to pre-released information, updates, conversations, insights, and exclusive events, your support also affords us the opportunity to expand the quality and reach of our excellent programming in thoughtful and authentic ways to more and more people. And more importantly, white people need to stop trying to get free shit from Black people. All right, seriously, your financial support is a vote of confidence, and it's an enabler of vision and innovation. So why not click that link today and join the movement? I want to thank you in advance for your support and your partnership. Jennifer just asked me to talk about this committee, or this ad hoc committee that I've had the pleasure of co-chairing with my good friend, Dr. Angela Byers-Winston. So I got a call from the chancellor probably last year. I think my first question was, am I in trouble? I go, no, on the contrary. And so a number of things have, happened on campus and campuses, and I appreciate that Jennifer wanted to get ahead of it. So she called and said, I want to have a faculty member who co-chairs along with the community. And so I agreed, thinking that we're going to finish our project in January, and we're still wrapping it up now in late summer, but it's because there was great commitment. So day one, we gathered the group in person in Bascom Hall. I've been off campus for about 35 years, so I forgot how hot Bascom Hall gets in some of those rooms. But it brought back a lot of memories being back in that space. And we were charged with really ascertaining not only what the environment was that would help students, Black students particularly, to thrive, but what things were present that actually made that very difficult. And I remember we gathered, we were able to be in the room alone for a little bit before the chancellor showed up. And we stated a couple of things in terms of ground rules, that we want to speak with alumni. We said that we want to talk to current Black students. We want to talk to Black faculty and staff. It also came up that we wanted to talk to white faculty and staff to get a sense from them why we're still here, why we have the past issues and some of the present issues. And so when the chancellor came into the meeting, one of the things that Dr. Byers-Winston mentioned right up front to her was, this isn't a problem that we've created.
Right.
That framed how we were going to go about this. A couple of things I want to state. One, there were people who were employees, that they had never been in all Black space on campus, and they appreciated. They said, I remember some of them looking around and saying, I've been in, space that includes people of color, but this is the first time that I've been in just Black space to talk about Black issues. So that really galvanized the team. Because you would think in our 175-year history that even as we've discussed these issues, that that's sort of a no-brainer, but that had not always happened. That your staff had a hand in selecting people, that it wasn't just you, the chancellor alone was very helpful. But stating we're not going to injure ourselves by trying to address the issues as if we're the problems that need to be fixed.
Absolutely.
And I think being able to clear the air, and not only say that among ourselves, because sometimes you say things when it's just your group, your people, your inner circle, but we're able to share that with you. So when you came in the room, we stated that this Black space feels sacred to us. We appreciate it. We're not going to dishonor folks by just doing something that's already been done. We're not just going to rubber stamp something that either the campus has made or other reports that are out. We were going to be judicious and academic in our approach. We would read all of the most recent reports from the last 20 or 30 years, and that we would listen to people who still have an interest in the well-being of the university. That touched me as well, that with the past history, what happened in the late 60s, what's going on campus now with the Supreme Court ruling, I was deeply touched by the Black members in the room who were still proud to be Badgers. Yeah. Sometimes they didn't come up front with that because there might have been things that they didn't appreciate, but they didn't have the avenues to express it. Yeah. And that hit me in a very powerful way. And so that led us to bringing in experts. We met with you and said, Chancellor, we want access to your staff, and not just your Black staff, your white staff. And I have to say, Chancellor, you didn't blink. You didn't ask us for a list of questions that we were going to ask them.
Nope. Right.
We also asked for access to your colleagues. We said, if we need to talk to someone who you respect or whose work is really prominent and effective in this area, and you have access to them as the chancellor, and we don't, would you help to open that Rolodex? Yep. And that helped us to lead with a lot of integrity, that we weren't hamstrung, there wasn't a desired outcome that we were rubber stamping, but we got a chance to use the proverbial white glove test and to talk with key non-Black leaders, not just about what's going on with Black students, staff, and faculty, but what might be happening with white students, staff, and faculty that has become problematic or a barrier. And that process reminded me of a statement you made in your investiture, which I thought was really, really powerful. You had said it to me individually, but I heard you say it up front, and that is you knew that Wisconsin was struggling with racism. But you weren't quite prepared for the level of it in Madison because it has this reputation of sort of being like a Berkeley of the Midwest. And so the process of listening to the Black community and this wonderful report is making recommendations. We've talked to Black faculty and students. We've involved representatives from the Black Power Coalition, a number of Black alumni, even those with the capacity to also be key donors. So I feel like a lot of things were really covered. But I think the part that stood out to us was that our findings, at least among our real candid discussions, aligned with what you said in that investiture statement, that racism isn't just like humidity or snow, like it's just out there. There are people who participate or benefit from or see it as a necessity or a necessary structure in place. And so I'm curious, as you take a look and as you've taken a look at our report, and again, we're going to have a part 2 to talk about that. Are you also thinking through your strategies of addressing the issues of systemic racism that have surprised you about Madison? That has nothing to do with people of color. That has to do really with white people in power. How are you thinking about those structures and addressing them?
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for both your leadership in being game to co-chair this. I'm incredibly grateful to both you and Dr. Angela Byers-Winston for co-chairing.
Thank you.
And to every member of the committee who was willing, who cares enough about the institution to be willing to engage in a pretty substantial year-long process of thinking hard about ways to make it better.
Yes.
I don't take that for granted at all, and I'm really grateful for it. I also I did try to, sort of say, yes, I'm not going to control who you talk to or what you look at or how you think about these questions. And to the extent that you want to get access to people, that I can help make that possible. You have my
Right.
commitment that you will have my support to do that. And I also asked you my hope was that you would both give me a report that would have some actionable things in the short to medium term.
Yes, you did.
But that you'd also have some aspirational things that we probably can't do this minute. But if you only gave me things that I could just say yes, 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 yes to, then you probably weren't being broad enough and ambitious
Exactly.
enough for the enterprise, right?
Or honest enough.
Right, that's right. All of the above.
Sure.
And we're getting. I've had the chance to take a look at the draft report, but I know that you and Dr. Charleston and your team are finalizing it, and I look
Yes.
forward to being able to, share it with the world and also to share some next steps. It's true. So when I had the great opportunity to come to Madison and move here 2 years ago, I knew a little bit about some of the pretty intense racial disparities in Milwaukee. Like, that kind of gets national attention. But I've got to tell you, Alex, I didn't quite know that that was true here in Madison as well. That wasn't something that I understood as much before I got here. And I mean, I do think there's a lot of people here in Madison, white folks as well as black folks, who are working hard to try to change those things. But I think it's also part of our reality here that we can't pretend away. And that was something that I wasn't necessarily understanding or expecting before I got here. I've also, though, been so impressed and excited by some of the ways that this community, and especially black folks in this community, are building opportunities to change that story. It shouldn't be black folks' job to do that on their own. I want to be really, really clear about that. But I also want to name that this is the moment of the Black Business Hub, that there's just been a groundbreaking for the Center for Black Excellence.
Yes.
And so this feels like a moment where there is the opportunity for us to come together and begin to create some different futures for Madison and for UW-Madison in this space. At the same time, it's a moment of headwinds, right? We're in a really polarized political environment.
Oh,
We're
for
in
sure.
A time when people are sometimes quicker to throw darts than give each other grace. And so I'm hoping, but I can't say I'm sure, that our better angels can help us as a community, as a university, as a state, and as a nation, like, find some paths forward where
Yes.
where we look candidly at the challenges, we grab onto the opportunities, and that we also acknowledge that there's a lot of folks who are feeling disillusioned right now, and that sense of disillusionment crosses race, class, identity, and we got to find ways back to having more collective hope and hope in
We
community.
definitely do. How surprised were you by the Supreme Court ruling last summer? Like, in your experience as a leader in an academy, as a legal scholar, did you ever see that happening in our lifetime, or was it just a matter of time? Unfortunately,
My candid answer is that by the time it happened, I wasn't at all surprised.
Okay.
I think a few years earlier, I would have hoped that this wasn't the direction that we'd go in. We at UW-Madison, affirmative action, race-based affirmative action was one tool in our toolbox, only
Right.
one, but it was one. We were incredibly intentional about never admitting any student that we didn't think deserved to be there and that could succeed in our community, but looking at racial background and underrepresented racial backgrounds from folks who come from communities that traditionally haven't had as much opportunity to go to college was one element in our admissions landscape over the last few years. And if we had had our druthers, we would have still been able to have that tool in our toolbox. Maybe not forever. Maybe there'd be a future world where we didn't need it anymore, but we didn't really think that that world had arrived yet. That said, look, we follow the Supreme Court. Like, we are absolutely going to follow the law. There's just zero question about that. And so that has led to some changes in how we've gone about admissions. And I don't yet know what that means for our student numbers this fall. But we lost a tool. We lost a tool in our toolbox, and we're going to have to find legal and appropriate ways of making sure that we're able to build and grow opportunity for all students, including racially diverse students, including students from all economic backgrounds, and from all over this state and country. And so that's going to be we're going to have to see what this year we've been race blind in our admissions, including all of our admissions staff, including me. I'm not an admissions staff member. I don't really. Please make the world understand I have nothing to do with individual admissions decisions. That doesn't sometimes stop people on the street from telling me about their nephew or their cousin and I'm like, this isn't me. That's not my role.
I'm a former UW-Madison admissions officer, and I know that the chancellor had nothing to do with that.
Absolutely nothing. But it has meant some changes. And what we are still able to do, though, we are still able to look at socioeconomic opportunities. We're able to work to make sure that we're strengthening those. We're also able to take up some of the things that you and I have talked about how do we create a stronger culture on our campus?
Right.
How do we help ourselves by asking those in our community who really care? I mean, like you and like so many of our Black alums, how do we ask for your help in also...
That's going to be key.
Exactly. It's going to be absolutely key. And so, it's been a hard year in that respect. I mean, it's been a hard year in a bunch of ways. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, from the complexities with the legislature to the Supreme Court decision to global conflicts that have created some pretty meaningful tensions on campuses all over the country, including ours. But I also am someone who believes that out of challenge comes opportunity. And again, to just come back to the report, that too emerged. That emerged from a really painful incident on campus with a terribly racist video that was devastating, and where many were also very upset at what we couldn't do. And part of what we got to take in those moments is to sort of say, all right, there's things we can't do. We have legal constraints, but what can we do? And this report and this ad hoc committee was a collective effort to say, how can we try to take really painful moments and use them as a catalyst for positive change? It shouldn't take really painful moments for us to move forward and do the right thing. So I'm not gonna pat myself on the back for that at all. But I also do want to be honest about the fact that that painful moment was a catalyst.
Sure.
And again, I'm just incredibly grateful that people like you raised your hand and said, yes, I'll help, when you could have said, I've given and given and given. I've done a lot for this university. And
that did cross my mind.
Yeah, I understand.
But I saw it as a very critical moment as well, to interject things from the community by asking, well, how can the community be involved? Right. We understand that the students will do things and that's not endorsed, but make videos, but that's not endorsed by the university. No. But how do we involve let's just say if it's against Black students, how do we involve the Black community and Black elders, and at least having a discussion before someone's readmitted? Not that that's a policy yet, but the fact that we could say, all right, maybe there are things you can't say, but let us say them, or let's find out how we can work together to let people know when you do that, it impacts all of us, but it does bring a different level of commitment. I know that we have a hard stop because you've got a busy day. So with our remaining 2 minutes, let me just ask, Are there colleagues that you look to, other chancellors or other universities that are honestly and boldly or courageously, I should say, working through these issues that you look to and just say, that's a person I look to and I like to have conversations with them about how to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm the job that I have is an incredible opportunity, and sometimes other chancellors and presidents are an amazing source of just conversation, dialogue, bouncing ideas off one another. I'm really grateful to be in the Big Ten, which now goes coast to coast
It
and
sure
even
does.
includes my previous institution.
Yes.
Because that gives us some pretty structured opportunities to talk to each other and learn from each other and ask what's working and ask what isn't. And I'm a big believer that we should both forge our own paths. Like every university is different, every
Exactly.
situation is different, but also, my gosh, we should learn from what's actually working elsewhere and from what other folks have tried without a lot of success. So, there's a number of other university chancellors and presidents. I won't embarrass them by naming them here,
Sure.
but who I do have on speed dial, and
Okay.
and vice versa, where I can say, "Hey, we're really struggling with this. Can you offer me any candid advice?"
That's great to
And
know.
I'm really grateful for that. I mean, these would be harder jobs without that. At the end of the day, though, each of us is individually accountable and responsible for the decisions we make for our campus. And if I try to borrow a great idea from another campus and it doesn't work here, hey, that's on me.
Right. No, I got that. Chancellor, I know we're wrapping up. Thank you for agreeing for doing the second part. We can talk more specifically about the recommendations, but also thank you for being here because often when racial issues are discussed, CEOs, whether they're academics or they're in the corporate world, will send sort of their DEI person to sort of talk about that, like, send the legal team, send the DEI team, send the HR team. I appreciate you as the leader of a major research institution being willing to sit down and talk about your convictions, your aspirations, places that are tough for you, because I think in building stronger bridges with the community, it helps people to know, and people will, because people are listening from all 137 countries, and many of whom are alumni from the university. This may be the first time that they've heard the voice of a chancellor in something that's not mainstream or medium that's not mainstream communications. And so I appreciate the step in this connection because I think it helps people to understand the nature of the work, the difficulty, but also that you're up for the task.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the invitation, and this has to be the work of all of us. I mean,
Yes.
I greatly appreciate the leadership of Dr. LeVar Charleston, my Chief Diversity Officer, and those with whom he works. But it can't be that it's only their work. It has to be something that we care about as a whole institution, and that has to include and does include me and my office. One of the realities of my role is that there's a lot I can do and a lot I can't do. And so inevitably around really challenging things, you can try to move things forward and also you disappoint people. That's called Tuesday, right? That's but in this space for this community, if at the end of my chancellorship we haven't made some forms of progress toward belonging for all of our students,
Yes.
I will be wildly disappointed, first and foremost in myself. So, at the same time, it's really hard work, especially in this political environment where there's so much polarization
Yes.
and misunderstanding. And so we have to try to navigate through this in ways that name our values, but also try to listen to a diversity of voices and find common ground. And I am so grateful for you as a leader, and frankly, Alex, as one of those people I can call, along with other university chancellors and presidents,
thank you.
along with faculty,
Yes.
and along with others, when I can say, this is really hard. What advice would you give me?
I appreciate that. I appreciate it.
As do I. So I look forward to part 2.
Yes. Well, that's a great note to end on. My special guest has been Chancellor Jennifer Mnookin, who is the chancellor for the UW-Madison, my alma mater. thank you so much for your time and for being here. And I'm looking forward to being in touch with your team about part two. Safe travels as you continue your work across the entire state, because our reach is not only around the world, but deeply in this state. But thank you for this discussion, and thank you for your commitment and for your work in our community.
Well, and thank you for being such an incredible leader and such an incredible badger.
Yes. All right. As you can tell, I'm really excited about season 10 and these great conversations that we're having. And so I appreciate the Chancellor coming and talking about her experiences, her background, the things that she hopes for. And also, I want you to remember that we're going to have a part two, because when our report is released, I really want to have a more frank, in-depth conversation about concrete next steps and getting more of a sense of her level of commitment to really making these things happen and these things fly. At the end of each of these episodes, I want you to pause and not just be entertained or tantalized by very honest and inspiring conversation, but I want you to think about, what can you do to lean in and help the podcast to be better? You can go to alexg.com and sign up to be a part of our mailing list so that you are notified whenever I drop special information. We have created an online community on Facebook. There's a link in the notes so that you can go to Facebook if you're a listener, and there's a bit of acceptance process so that we can keep that space safe and productive and professional. But I would love for you to be a part of the ongoing discussions where we take the topic matters or the topics that we've been discussing and continue them in that form that one of my staff members will oversee and take care of. I'm really excited about that. I hope you're noticing that our podcast is becoming more and more professional. It's because I'm able to broaden the team. It's not just me and Jeremy and Eli. Don's a part of the team. Ariana's a part of the team. Jakisha's a part of the team. And you know what helps us to do that? Your Patreon support, your financial support, which can be as little as $2 a month, or the sky's the limit. There's also a link in there, because it's important. Don't just consume this information. I know we think, it's just a podcast. I didn't tell you to do it. It should be free. But if you're getting something out of this, if it's causing you to think, if this is making work better, if it's causing you to have meaningful conversations with your loved ones, significant others, your children, your bosses, your neighbors, then invest. Don't just pay it forward, pay it back, and invest at some level. And the other thing is, tell your friends, share the links, tell your friends, hey, you don't have to go all the way back and listen from season 1 to know what's going on, although I would advise it. But you can just jump right into season 10 and have these meaningful discussions. So please think about folks who could benefit from these kind of discussions and share, leave your comment, write a review, do something besides just listening, and help empower us to continue to bring this medium of conversation, this space for honest dialogue, to more and more people. I'm so glad to be your podcast host, Dr. Alex G., and thank you for being a part of another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. Have a great day.
Black like me. Black like me.
I want to thank you for taking time to listen to this episode of Black Like Me podcast with Dr. Alex G. When I first imagined doing this podcast, I thought about myself with my iPhone sitting in a room in my house, just sort of doing this all on my own. But you know what? The reason why we've won awards and the reason why we have over 200 episodes up is because I have a brilliant team who helps me to make this podcast what it is. So let me take a moment and thank Jeremy and Eli, who are my editors and producers extraordinaire, Jakisha, who handles marketing. If you like that opening track of our theme song, you can show your appreciation to Corey Saffold, who created that and produced it, and Marcus Fleming, my cousin, who's on vocals. I also want to say that this podcast was started with the generous support of the Human Family Unity Foundation, and so we always want to stop and thank them for that. For the many patrons who support us through our Patreon page, thank you, thank you, thank you. You don't just listen, but you support, you lean in, and you help this podcast to be what it is. And then I need to thank you, the listeners, who make a point of downloading this, listening to it, and sharing it. Without all of you, this podcast would not be what it is and what it's becoming. Thank you so much.
Black like me.